All right, and Ryan, I guess as vice chair, if you'd like to call us to order, since Derwin is not with us yet.
Good morning, everyone. Glad we were able to bring this group together. Marla, thank you for distributing the materials in advance of the meeting. Hopefully everybody saw that attached to the meeting planner that also had the Zoom minutes. So I'm guessing since you logged in, the Zoom link, so I'm guessing since you logged in, you've got the materials. There was an agenda attached to the meeting. So it looks like the first thing up is to review the logo updates from the last meeting and see those top choices. So I'll turn it over to Andronika to talk about that.
Thank you. Yes. Good morning, everyone. How y'all doing?
Good. All right.
So I know everybody got the emails and is anxious to get this moving. We're really excited because we have 2 items that and one of the things that I know we said we wanted to adjust the agenda a little bit to talk through some things that we wanted to make sure that we could have the conversation this morning and get us launched. We're a little bit behind the new schedule, but that's okay. We're not far off, and we can recover ground. But the first thing that we need to do is, as I promised you, the most fun thing you're going to do inside of this process, because I'm a weirdo when it comes to fun, is settle on the logos. Marla, I can't share my screen. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, so this is the first selection. These are not in any order of ranking or importance or anything like that. It's just how the designer ended up putting them back together. So big changes, just to remind everyone, we needed to make sure that we had the hyphen in Winston-Salem. And we changed the tagline where a home, instead of where housing is affordable for all, where a home is affordable, we added for all. So we think that this works really well. This is the planner's blue, as we're calling it, which connects inside of the concept, the blueprint concept, and with the way the graphic is designed. Then you move to the next one, still similar to the first one, but not quite as architectural in design. It's got some of those elements, but it's just clean, it's clear, it's organized really well. And then your third choice, which we did in Winston-Salem blue, which is kind of really good for banners. All of these are going to work well on signages and things like that, but it's just a matter at this point of which one you all like better. And we can also use the Winston-Salem blue on the other 2. They don't have to stay in the planner's blue. We wanted to, everybody liked the blue over the red, and but y'all did want to see it see one of these in Winston-Salem blue. And again, just remembering that this blue will go beautifully on this one and on this one. So it's just a matter of what are your choices? Don't everybody rush.
Can you show all 3 at one time? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get a group together really quickly.
Yeah. I was just saying, I just wasn't good on style when it comes to these kinds of things. So I don't have a preference. I kind of like people knowing, like the third one, just for simplicity reasons, I like the third one. It's not as architecturally sightful as the first 2 are. Actually, the first one is really pretty attractive, but I kind of like people knowing when they see it that it is Winston-Salem without having to wonder what WSHB stands for before they read it.
Right. Okay, so that's, so basically, I think you were saying the second one probably is out, but wait, give me
For me,
Give me
underneath,
2
yeah.
seconds. Yeah, give me 2 seconds. Let me get these up here for you all. And, oh, wait, I know where they are. Because I've got them clipped. I've just got to get them put into, onto a single page for y'all. Anybody else got any initial feelings?
I would say.
I kind of like what Joe said. Yeah, I would definitely maybe rule out the middle one. I don't have real strong feelings like Joe about either one of those. I kind of like how how it spells it out better in the third one. Just wondering what that would look like in Planner's Blue. Sorry.
I mean, we could do that in, we could do it in Planner's Blue. And so, yeah, we wanted to talk about that too. The colors are all available for all of them. So, all right, here we go. We've got them all up on one. And let me share my screen with you all. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
So
we
we're
can see
thinking,
it.
so, oops, sorry, it moved on us. So we're thinking, when I say we say middle, let me get my annotation out so we can, let me get my arrow out so we can point. So when we
Can I ask a
say,
question? Let me ask a question
Go
while
ahead.
you're doing that. And I still like the bottom one, but does the word, since the word community is not in the first two,
Right. I
do
was about to
we
mention that.
gain or lose anything by using that word in the third one?
no, we can take, we're planning on taking it out. It was on an earlier iteration and we just decided to leave it in. But we can take it out. She can
Okay.
squeeze she'll be able to squeeze the houses down, so that it will fit and
Okay.
shrink it'll be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my question too, because I knew it wasn't in the others that we had discussed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I didn't want anybody to think it was congregate housing we were talking about or something either.
No, that's right.
And Renika, I think maybe I take back my comment about Planner's Blue on the last one, because I like how that where a home is affordable for all, that
Yeah, I
color
do too, Paul.
progression there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I kind of like how that works. Maybe I don't know whether the silhouettes of the housing, how that would look in Planner's Blue, but I really like how the bar at the bottom kind of progresses like that. So
The gradation. Got it.
yeah, yep.
And yeah, we should be able to maintain that inside of Planner's Blue. It'll probably, what I'll talk to her about doing is probably reversing it, frankly, and having the Planner's Blue start at, because it's a fairly light color, and get a little darker, as opposed to being even lighter and then shading up to the Planner's Blue, which is a little lighter.
Yeah.
And that's how we can handle that one.
So let me ask a question also, Marla and Renika. Where would this logo be used primarily? Is this for stationery? Is this for labeling, documents, like when you're going to do a deck or a presentation? Or is this where you're going to put, make marketing material for community meetings and presentations and things?
All of that.
Yep, all of those things.
So I wonder what it looks like when it's blown up, or expanded versus the smaller versions.
Well, let's see. Let's try that.
Well, while you're doing that, I tend to agree with the third one, and perhaps dismissing the second one, and we decide on the first or the third one once you're able to enlarge it.
Yep, give me a second. Okay.
Morning, Derwin. We kind of jumped in because we've got a few members who are going to need to depart between 11 and 11:15. So we jumped right into things this morning to make sure any decision points, everybody would be present to participate.
All
It
right.
doesn't make any difference as far as, space wise. I guess I was just envisioning a lot of white space around it if it's gonna be, if it's gonna appear to be that, I won't say small, because I know it has the expansion capability, but I just didn't know how much white space would be around it wherever it's used as a presentation.
So I'm gonna show it to y'all but I've also, I've got it up on the screen in here. I'm gonna also take a picture of it for you all so you could see it blown up really big. So you all can see it now, kind of a little off center. That was me. That's not it. That's just how it's placed.
Right.
Hold on, let me fix that really quickly. So I was like, wait, this is off center.
That's all right. I still think I'm gonna, personally speaking, I still think I like that one. I think no matter how it presents, just because of its, again, the simplicity and without having to guess anything.
Right.
So I looked at it quickly.
There you go. That's it in center. And then I'm gonna take a picture of it on the big screen here in my office. And so you all can see like in context. Let's see. How it looks up on a wall.
I like number 3 as well. I think I can visualize it in a lot of different ways and in a background format,
Yeah, good point, Paul.
To me, number 3 looks like what the city is already using in some of their other documents, especially around strategic planning.
Do you think it'll get mixed up with it, George?
Well, no, I think it flows pretty well with the rest of the documents. You
okay.
want something to kind of stand out, but on the other hand, I think it matches pretty well. So you don't want to confuse people. You want to have that same message, and people will know if this is something that looks similar to the city, they'll know who it's coming from.
Oh, I see.
Do we have anyone opposed to moving forward with number 3? Any strong opinions about the other 2 over number 3?
I don't have a strong opinion about the other 2, but I would throw out the option that you can do in some logo redesigns I've worked on in the past. We've done 2 versions, one that's a little more vertical and one that's a little more horizontal. They have the same elements in them, but that way when you have the vertical, it works well. Like if you're going to do a shirt with a logo on the chest, the vertical sometimes works better than say the horizontal, or if you're using it on some sort of, it's like just a slightly tweaked version. That way you have the 2 options depending on what you're using it for.
Okay.
Got it. That makes sense. We can talk to the designer about that. Do y'all see the screen? We're in the office with it on my TV. It's blown up really big. You can read it. You can see it in context to one of our team members who I'm gonna introduce to everybody. Y'all met Alex last time. Trent Myers is our chief of staff here. He's also going to be working with us on this as well. So you can see it in context to another person. You're up there.
One question, I know we have this color and we talked a little bit about the planner's blue.
Planner's blue, right.
Yeah. Now, if the consensus is this particular layout, of course, we talked about removing the word community. Is there any desire one way or another to see a possibility in the planner's blue?
Yeah. I think that's what I heard, that it would maybe like to see it in planner's blue.
Okay. All right. But at least we have the design with the word community removed. And now the only last question is which version of blue?
Right.
Okay.
as well as getting a vertical and a horizontal standard. And so, Joe, back to your question about what this is going to be used for. It's going to be used on everything. Part of the strategy that we put forth inside the marketing plan, it's fairly comprehensive. We do want to saturate with this. Y'all are going to have a website. There's going to be, you know, shirts, banners, marketing materials, printed materials is going to get slapped on everything. And so yes, it is important. That's why, you know, we do need you to love it, because you're going to see it a lot.
A lot. Yeah, that doesn't change my opinion at all. I still think, you know, but you know, I guess some difference to John's comment about putting it on shirts and things, and how, you know, if you're going to put it on t-shirts, how don't want the wrap around to the back kind of thing. So I would think there would be a way to proportion that from a vertical standpoint, as opposed to squashing it to make sure that it all shows up on the front of a t-shirt or something.
That's right. No, that's right.
Okay.
All right. I think we're settled. And so then what we're going to do is move forward, knock it out, get this back to you all ASAP. And then, because we're going to need to start getting things printed and getting things printed locally in Winston-Salem, so that when we come for the launch event, we'll have these things ready. We won't be buying anything like nationally and getting them shipped to Winston-Salem. We're going to be working with local Winston-Salem consultants and contractors to do a lot of this work. Mm-hmm. We're talking about investing in the community. We actually have to do that. Okay.
Andronika, what do you
That's
think
great.
about us maybe moving to the schedule parts, especially for the launch date and all of that, and then we can come back up if it's okay with Alex and do the presentation. Okay, thank you.
Yep, nope, that's exactly right. Sorry. I was getting a notification about something. So yes, let's definitely do that. So we wanted to do a kickoff this month. We're going to need to push that to next month. So we are going to need to pick a date today and get all of that locked in by the end of next week. With locations, we still have the locations that you all looked at, but we just need to make sure we have a date that fits in your time schedule. And so we'd like to get it finalized by the end of next week and then start advertising for it. This is going to be a kickoff, and it's an announcement. We want as many people from the community to participate as possible, but it's not going to be the only chance, as we talked about last time, that we get to talk to community. And it is really what we want to start doing is it's a signal as well to stakeholders. So what we want to give you all is invitations. We want to get the designer finalizing this and having you all send out invitations to people you would really like to have be there at the kickoff, folks that you know, and that includes community members, but as well as lenders, realtors, so folks can understand this process, ask questions in a structured way, get those questions answered. And we will also be at that time rolling out the big schedule. Since we have our meeting on not y'all's Affordable Housing Coalition meeting, which you all have graciously agreed to give us time in every month to provide an update on the affordable housing on the plan. On Winston-Salem's housing blueprint, we're going to start using the terminology. We'd like to do it before then, right? So that what we're doing is coming in and reporting out. It doesn't necessarily need to be on that same Thursday. It can be, but that is for you all to decide.
I'm looking at the calendar, and the May meeting is the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, just as a FYI. And so I guess I'm wondering if it might be easier to start first with understanding any dates that are absolutely out for people. And because our meeting is Memorial Day weekend. Is that still good for everyone, or do we need to adjust the May meeting date as well?
Well, I'll let somebody else speak first. I don't want to jump in there all the time. But I can just tell you that Memorial Day weekend is not a good weekend for me to meet. I can just tell you that. So I don't know how anybody else feels.
Well, and we're not proposing, to be clear, we're not proposing that we come in on a Saturday and Sunday. We would not, we
I'm
want to
talking
do it
about
before.
Friday as well.
Okay. Okay, I just want to be clear that we weren't.
I'm sorry, I'm starting with Friday.
Yeah, for the Friday.
You're starting with Friday. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
our normal
gotcha.
meeting.
Yeah, I think most people have that 3-day weekend too, that or 4-day
Right.
weekend, so
Mhm. Okay,
not good for me either.
I know I won't be available either.
okay.
Okay.
Would we need to look at either the day before, like that Thursday, or do we need to move it back a week to the 19th?
Or what about June 2nd?
I'd have to find somebody else to run the meeting because I'm not here on June 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Right.
I'm not the most critical person, just saying. If that works better.
Now,
for
are we talking
everybody
about
else.
our regular, now let me make sure I know what we're talking about. Are we talking about our regular meeting as opposed to the launch meeting or what?
First,
Correct.
the regular meeting, then we can try to figure out kind of
Right.
when the launch would be in relation to that.
Yeah, well, personally speaking, I have a North Carolina Medical Care Commission meeting on the 19th in Raleigh, so I won't be here. But again, you may not get everybody, but I could certainly look at the agenda and leave my proxy if that's needed for anything, but I won't be able to be present on even a virtual call.
What about the 25th? Thursday, the 25th?
Thursday, the 25th is okay with me.
Me too.
Works for me.
Yeah, it's okay with me too.
Works for me as well.
Okay, okay. All right, so regular meeting. 5:25. Okay, now where do we see the launch in relation to that?
I think last month we talked about either Tuesday or Thursday evenings being ideal.
Right,
Is that right? And
that's correct.
So my only conflict would be the Tuesday, the 16th, but I'd be okay with all the others.
I personally
So the
prefer
8th?
Thursday myself, but that's just me.
Sorry,
What'd you say,
I said
Derwin?
I personally,
Derwin, go ahead.
I personally prefer a Thursday, but if Tuesday works better for others, that's fine by me.
What month we looking at?
May.
Yeah, so we're looking at the 18th or the 23rd. And I will say the 18th is going to be a challenge for me. Getting down, and we have to be down there. So if the 23rd works, that would be, but we could try to make the 18th work. It's going to be a challenge, but the 23rd would work better.
And this is a 6 o'clock, is this an evening meeting?
It's an
I think
evening
we said
meeting,
5:30, maybe.
5:30.
Now, is this a meeting where everybody, okay, is this for the community though? This would be advertised where people will come out. So is it that you need everybody on the coalition to be available for the meeting, or is it more for the community?
It's more for the community. We would want you all to be there if you could. And we would want you also, again, to be sending out invitations to people to say,
Right.
to identify some folks that you would want to, key stakeholders that you would want to be able to invite and say, here, we're kicking this off and we'd like you to come and ask questions.
Right. Yeah.
And John said,
I have a standing Tuesday evening or afternoon event, but I can manage one way or the other if it's the 23rd, but I can do either.
Yeah, 23rd works for me.
23rd is fine.
23rd is good with me.
all right, we have a new date and time.
Andronika, can I ask a question too? And I know I wasn't at the last meeting, but when I hear kickoff, could I just get a 30-second overview? I'm sorry, because when I hear community coming, and I know they're probably going to be firing all types of questions at us about stuff. I didn't know if we had worked out something, a script, some things we want to stay away from, some things we want to definitely be prepared to answer, or has any of that been discussed?
So we would be presenting that to you all in the next week and a half, but what we're looking at right now is high level of frequently asked questions form, having that laid out, printed so that people can have it, and recognizing that people are still going to have questions. We would want to do a preliminary data walk on the state of housing in Winston-Salem, an overview of the schedule and the process that we're looking at that we're going to be changing. But we want to lay out the schedule, and we also want to talk to them and familiarize them with what this looks like from an equitable standpoint, right? So the fact that they will get to ask questions, they get their questions answered. Either it might need to be a follow-up in writing, but it's going to be made available and it's going to be made public. And we'll have the website ready, where all of the information that will be there, that will be available there, will also be on the website at the same time. So that's the high level pieces that we would want to do for that meeting.
The only thing I would say, as far as that's concerned, I definitely think we probably need to leave more time for Q&A, because this is our first time rolling something out for quite some time, and people have had some concerns throughout the entire process. I'm pretty sure they're going to be asking a lot of questions. And again, just trying to make sure that we're on the same page with things we know for sure that we are doing concerning single family, multifamily, homelessness, just those types of things, because I don't know if we've really gotten into that type of detail. And I just wanted to make sure that we would be prepared to answer those as best we can.
Yep. That makes sense.
We allocate like 2 hours for the meeting, like 5:30 to 7:30?
Yes, that's what we were looking at. So keeping it tight to the overview, leaving room. We like to leave room for some questions about specific pieces that we're talking about, like the data walk, and then also having that flow into a larger facilitated Q&A.
Andronika, when you talk about we are speaking or we are doing this, can you speak to like who will be at the front of the room leading the conversation, responding to questions, that type of thing?
So obviously we would be there as facilitators, as well as helping to answer some of the questions around the strategy, me and my team. And then we would also want to identify some of you who could be there to answer some of these questions as well.
Something for this group to think about as you start to hone in on the agenda.
Correct. And because we also want to get, I have to talk to Marla a little bit about this, because we also would like to, and Paula, you too, I wanted to talk to you about it as well. We also like having at least one local facilitator helping to participate inside of these kinds of events. And so we wanted to identify somebody we could work with there. We all know how to do results-based facilitation, but we also still want there to be that we always have to make sure that we're striving to have the most cultural and cultural competency when working in a community. And that can only be done by somebody who is of that community. So we would want to bring someone onto the team to help facilitate the conversation. Not in a performative way either, in a real authentic way.
I think you're right, that certainly should be the case.
Yeah. Paul, were you getting ready to say something? Because you popped up on the screen. The funny thing about Zoom is, like when I have it set up where with my view, I've got the speaker view coming on. So when there's a little bit of background noise, people shift around. I've moved to the gallery view so that can stop happening.
So will the event happen at the library as we previously talked about?
No, this is where we're rescheduling it. We're rescheduling it.
So now I will need to go back to those different venues and see which location will be available.
Okay.
Mhm.
The library was one of those choices. What were the others as it relates to venues?
The Millennium Center and Goodwill.
Library is a good location, but whatever works.
Okay, I think we're good.
And I'll do the reach out to the locations as soon as the meeting's over. Hopefully I can give you an update this afternoon or certainly by Monday.
All right. So Alex,
Unmute.
so I think we've made, yeah, sorry, that's no problem. We've made all of the decisions we made today. So Joe, if you have to duck out, you should be okay.
Well,
I've got,
I'll stay as long as I can until I have to go.
Okay, good.
yeah, I've got data stuff to share.
One quick question though, Andronika. Will there be any decisions needed for the marketing and communications plan or just committee tasks?
No, we're gonna start, I'm gonna get the designer, I'm gonna get her this stuff. I'm actually trying to email her right now. That's why I was like, I'm gonna tee Alex up and send her the email so she can get moving, and hopefully she might even be able to get us something by end of day.
Okay.
And then we'll start slamming on down on everything and hopefully get everybody an invitation. We'll send everybody the planners blue as well as the options, hopefully first thing next week. We'll do that via email if everybody can just be prepared to sign off on it via email. And then wanted to get everybody the invitations once you get the location confirmed and get those all knocked out and start getting stuff produced. And then we'll be working, go ahead.
Well, one question on the invitations, is it the thought that the members would send invitations like to their contact list? Or are we doing?
And that's not the primary way, right? And that's not the primary way we're going to advertise this, but we definitely do want the Affordable Housing Coalition members. They are the executive committee for the Housing Blueprint. And we do want them thinking through who do they think should be there. In addition to, us doing some local advertising, and with your communication list with the city, putting some things out there, press releases, things like that as well. But we would like the Affordable Housing Coalition to send personalized invitations to people that they think should be there.
Great.
It's not that's not the primary mode of marketing.
Sure.
It's just, we want to make sure that they are making some personal asks.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
And Marla, I think if I'm not mistaken, you've got a master list of organizations and all that we had worked on.
We started.
several-
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure we could add more to it. And so I'll find that and maybe circulate it, and folks can tell me who might be missing, separate and apart from who you would extend your own personal invite to, but who might need to be added to that master list. Okay.
Can I ask a general question about that? Is this the kind of invitation that, and Derwin might have a perspective on this, having been, being a pastor, but is this the kind of thing that you announce in your church that's going to go on for those that are interested? This is the meeting logistic. I'm wondering if we would be, I don't know what the response would be, but that could get to be a lot of people. And I didn't know if from a space standpoint, how many we'd be prepared to host. I would hope that would be a problem, but I don't know.
So we're going to set up an Eventbrite registration piece, so that we're going to ask people to register, even the folks that you are inviting. And so that'll give us some indication
Okay.
on the number of people. We're planning for 75. Given how one of the things that happens community after community, no matter how severe the housing issue is, it's still not sexy.
Right.
And so getting throwing a wide net to get to 75, even if we get to 35, I'm gonna be dancing the jig. But we want to plan for 75. And then even if you get 100 to register, it's still, it's still not going to, we're still not going to get 70. We're still not going to get, if we get 100 to register, we might get half. And again, that's going to be cause for celebration.
Yeah. You answered my question. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It'll help me on my invitation list. Thank you.
Yeah.
Andronika and Marla, this question is probably for both of you. Some of the things that I've heard from people, and I think it might be good, kind of following on George's point about anticipating questions and all that, is we're going to be presenting this data walk, as you said, and Alex has been working on that and all that. I suspect there's going to be some people, because I've already experienced this question from some people, and I think Marla has heard it too, that are going to be pointing to, well, we had this 2018 study by Enterprise Partners, and we had For Everyone Home, and we had, why was that data bad, or why are we having to do this now? What is this? So I think that's probably needs to be part of the explanation about how this needs to add the value that's going to get us to the details of how you implement it, not just what are all the menu of things that could be done,
Right.
Right.
And that's why we want to put it, go ahead, Marla.
So, and certainly we'll be able to address that because, for instance, For Everyone Home was about anti-displacement. So it had a very specific focus, right? The housing study needs assessment told us about the needs, right? And so while we have taken bits of information, it's like now bringing all of those together, plus, when those things were done, we hadn't had a pandemic. Right. And the market being even like it is now with the interest rates and so forth. So things have changed, and it's not as though the other data was bad data. The data was what it was. We're in 2023 now. The Housing Study and Needs Assessment was conducted in 2018 based on data back then. So, the environment changes over time. And so this just kind of gives us a closer in time understanding of where we are in light of everything else that has transpired. So that's kind of generally how I would speak to that. And I'll let Andronika kind of add in your thoughts.
Right. And one of the things that this makes this model so popular, and one of the reasons why we think it's effective and impactful, the model that you all are using to develop your blueprint, is beyond the community engagement component, which is often missing from, the kind of the work. I've reviewed the enterprise study. It's a great study. It just doesn't have the community input inside of it. It gives you the data. So one, the data has to be updated, to Marla's point, because 5 years ago is a long time, especially after a pandemic. The other piece that's often missing from housing strategies like that is an actionable plan, a set of steps, and identifying who is responsible for taking those steps. So, and not just identifying them, getting them to commit, right? So to taking that step. So you've got, this is the issue. The numbers tell us we need X. A really good example of this, and I think it's going to be something that we might even want to use in some of the materials, is we know that a big concern for y'all is your CNI project for people who are talking about this. The CNI project. So how could this process help the CNI project, right? We're not suggesting that we start all over again. It is incorporate all the work that has been done and move to action, move to accountable action, and identify and getting people to say, I will do this. I will raise the money for the CNI project. And that's a simplistic answer, but that's the answer that certain people want. They're like, how are we going to find the money to close out this project? And so it is who is going to take responsibility for doing that, who can do it, and what rabbit warrens they're going to run down to find the money.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I am totally on board with that. I just wanted to kind of make sure you were aware. I've had to answer questions like that more than once. And while I haven't explained it as well as you just did, I've explained it some and people have appreciated, but I suspect because it's come up more than once, it's going to come up probably that night.
And some of these we need to write down and have available for people to reference and things like that. But we definitely need to make questions like that, Paul, definitely need to be front and center, and be prepared to answer through the Q&A versions of that, right? Because someone will say, I didn't hear the part of it that impacts me, even though so we're going to have the question. And again, that's where the facilitation is going to be critical. We don't want to shut anybody down, but we do need to be able to, effectively say, I hear you're shading this a little bit differently, but this is still the answer. This is also the answer to your question.
Right.
And we're going to stack with Derwin wanted to ask a question before Alex got started.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to prolong it any longer, but it was as long as Joe was still on, I wanted to toss this out there because it may be something that we would need to vote on or ask a question on. And Marla may also want to jump in on it. But I spoke yesterday with the city attorney about HB 551, which was in the newspaper this morning, if some have seen it. And provisions there. And John, I don't know if you have a thoughts any on HB 551. But I had a whole lot of heartburn about that. And that's why I reached out to her yesterday while it was moving through the House. For those who don't know, the House passed a bill on yesterday that went to the Senate that essentially it would restrict cities and counties from doing any protection of source of income protections. Charlotte asked for, and they make an amendment to allow for any city funds going into a project would allow the city to keep that kind of provision if the city puts funds into a project, but the blanket protection of source of income essentially would not be able to be available localities would not be able to do that. And then there was other provisions there around housing that other folks have raised concerns around. And city attorney said the council has not look to take a position on it, but I was wondering if we wanted to ask them to do so. They have a bunch of other bills that may be taking a higher perspective than this that directly impact the council, but I did want to toss that out there before Joe jumped off at any point.
I don't have I just saw that this morning in the paper. I didn't know that bill was even working through the House, to be honest with you, Derwin, but I actually, my first reaction was, something increasing, landlords' rights while taking away tenant rights just didn't seem right to me, just on the surface. So I didn't know all the particulars of the income considerations. I just know it didn't sound good for those that are in need of affordable housing and the way some of the tenants are being treated. And this may be totally off base from what the bill does, but I would hope that something like that gets watered down. I don't know enough about it to really make any real educated comments about it. I just know it's something that bears watching for those of us that are concerned about affordable housing.
Yeah, Darren, I know I'm familiar with the bill. My former employer is the apartment association, so they obviously have a stance on that. The bill's a little more. It's a multifaceted bill, so it's not just about the source of income. It's also about emotional support animals, cleaning up some of that regulation. There's some HOA provisions in there that have really nothing to do with rental housing. So it's a fairly widespread housing bill. On the source of income, what I can just give you what the industry, what the folks on the housing provider side, what their take on it is, and that is they're trying to get Section 8 reform at the national level, and the real rub has been that Section 8 is for a lot of market rate providers, there's a disincentive to it just because it's a complex system and it creates a lot of issues for them from a management perspective. They face a lot of times a gap in cash flow because inspections can take a long time. I mean, I won't go into all the details, but that's the gist of it, is that they would like to see Section 8 reform. And then I think the source of income issue would kind of resolve itself, but I don't work for those folks anymore. And I mean, I do, my organization, the apartment folks are members of ours. We focus more on the land use side of things, but the Apartment Association of North Carolina, I know, has been a supporter of that bill. So from the housing provider side, that's pretty much the stance. And to your point about the city, anything with city funds, generally that's a carve out. So the city can do what it can have its own requirements usually when it has its own funds involved. But that source of income is focused primarily on Section 8. I can tell you that. Or better known as vouchers.
Yeah.
Section 8 is the old term.
And this is not about that particular bill, but, and Durwin, I don't know if you need to conclude it, because I wanted to get back to the data differences that Danica just talked about, but I don't want to change it without you finishing your train of thought on that bill.
It's more so in the sense of whether or not folks wanted to, if we thought there was any need for there to be any commentary from this group in reference to the legislation itself. Was more general question.
Yeah, I would hope, as my last word on that, thinking about what you said Charlotte's done, I would hope that if the city's going to put any city funds into, even city funds that are appropriated through the federal government or even the state government, that our city would retain the right to be able to administer, the kind of protections that we would normally have, kind of thing. So that's the same kind of exception that Charlotte's done that Winston needs to do. I definitely think that needs to be a consideration.
Gotcha. And to that end, and we could move on. I'm gonna drop the link to that in the chat here. Is that provision that Charlotte requested it, because it'd be a statewide bill, it would be accessible to any municipality, that carve out to ensure that city funds could still have those. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And Joe, you reminded me.
Just a clarifying point to John's comment that this is typically a carved out. Was Charlotte asking for that to just kind of be clarified that that's still or is there a position that the bill changes that?
The original language of the bill would have just been a blanket restriction, which would have been regressive, would essentially taken that ability away. And so Charlotte requested to make sure that you could retain that.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry, I talked over you there for a second. Joe reminded me of something. So one other point about on the source of income that I've heard brought up is, if you have a blanket source of income protection, then any provider that takes a HUD loan, doesn't matter if they take vouchers or not. If they have a HUD loan of any kind, HUD financing, then they are covered by the source of income as well. So that's a broader blanket than just the voucher system. That's some of the feedback I've gotten as well. So I think there's the concern is from the housing provider side, is that it would require them to participate in a program that they may not have the capacity to participate in, or may not have the ability to wait for, if they don't have the funds for any gap in the timeline. They get the money retroactively, but there could be a 2 or 3 or 4 month gap before they start getting that rent in, and that could be problematic for them. So that's just one of the concerns that I've heard brought up on multiple occasions.
Okay. Okay, Darren, again, I'll give you the courtesy to, okay, you're done. I just want to get back, Andrew, to what you said about those differences in those plans or whatever in the data. And this may not be data specific, but I just want us to make sure we all understand regarding this affordable housing initiative effort. And Paul, obviously this speaks to me and you because we were at that council meeting, but we assured city council that this wasn't, you know, the same kind of housing study or the same kind of thing that we have done before that they paid for before. So anything that we can do to make sure we maintain a difference in those past things. And George, I appreciate you bringing that up because we need to make sure that we continue to be, you know, creative in putting this plan together for all affordable housing and not just, you know, specific things that have already been, you know, talked about or taken care of or funded in the past kind of thing. So I just thought I'd remind us of that as we go through this whole process, that this is a very different process than we've gone through before in any other housing study or data collection or that kind of thing. So the more we can stand out on that, I think the better off we'll be going forward. That's all.
And so, yeah, to the point, I think this is actually a really good conversation to kind of demonstrate the difference because this is the kind of bill that we would definitely want to be also highlighting and discussing over the next few months, no matter how it plays out. John, you raised some concerns and some fairly typical concerns that people often raise around Section 8 and HCVP program. The problem is that when you don't protect against based on source of income discrimination, you don't change the program by refusing to engage with it. You've got to engage with the program and give the the worry often is, and we can prove this. That's one of the things that we'll be sharing with you all is how some of the housing justice narrative work that we've done nationally that shows how people think about these programs. If we don't start talking about the fact that these are people and that landlords should be doing their job to assess the tenants based on the tenants, not using as a sweeping assessment however the rent is getting paid. It allows for discrimination, it allows for marginalization, and it also makes it really hard. And when there are real problems with the housing authorities across North Carolina, across the country, it makes it hard to engage with them when you're not when these are not potential partners, right? When you're not getting the whole of the community saying, you know, yeah, I'd like to take advantage of this program, but you're doing a bad job. If we're not making it clear that the people aren't the problem, that the system is. And that's the kind of conversations that we need to be fostering and facilitating. And these kind of bills, unfortunately, they send the wrong message. They say something is wrong with these people and you are right to be wary of them. And the message doesn't land. It's not how human beings are wired. They don't hear a piece of legislation like that getting passed and say, yeah, that's right. My housing authority should be doing a better job. They get confirmation that Section 8 residents are trash. And that's the wrong message to send right now.
And Janika, I totally get what you're saying. On the flip side, it's always assumed that what I hear when I'm representing landlords is that if they refuse to accept vouchers, it's because they don't want those particular people in their properties, and it can't possibly
that's all you can assume because they are saying I won't do my job because of the voucher and assess you as a potential tenant. That is the case. When they have to do that anyway, if I showed up or you showed up without the voucher, they would have to assess us as tenants. They're using the source of income to exclude them without thinking about who they are. They could be bad tenants. They could be great tenants. They're saying the voucher is enough to say that you're not worth it. That it is discriminatory.
They're saying that they don't want to participate. And we could go on for hours, but what they're saying is we don't want to participate in a program that is exponentially harder to manage than a normal renting process. So their problem is with the business process, not necessarily with people.
And again, do you want to fix that? Do you want to fix that? Because saying you don't want to participate in it means you don't want to participate in it. It means you don't want to rent to those people. But if you want to fix it so that it can be fixed and you can participate, then you don't start with saying, I want to reserve the right to not have to rent to these people.
What they're saying is I want to have the right not to have to wait 3 or 4 months for rent and carry that burden, because the
but you
system
don't
is
have
not.
to.
What's that?
Right, but you don't. You don't have to. You can say you could agree to consider Section 8 renters and still not rent to Section 8 renters, right? You could just say, look, everybody who showed up doesn't meet my qualifications. You're nobody by saying that you can't put up a sign saying no Section 8. And again, everybody, that's one of the things that we are going to be talking about through this process is folks have to own what that message says. You're saying to you, putting up a sign on a rental property and saying rent, no Section 8. It sends a signal that something is wrong with Section 8 renters. It does not send the message that the housing authority is a flawed entity and a problematic partner. It just doesn't send that message. And people have to own what they are communicating. No matter what good reason that they have for it, they have to own how they are reinforcing existing prejudices that make this system harder to navigate for the people y'all all want to help.
Right. I see what you're saying. And we're not going to come to an agreement on this because my take is that then we have signs that say, don't take Section 8 because the housing authority isn't doing its job or HUD is not doing its job, right?
That's okay. That's not talking about the people. That's not talking about the people. Nothing wrong with those signs. That's criticizing the system. That is putting the blame where the blame lies.
I got you. And I will tell you that I could, because I was in DC a month ago with the National Association, and that is exactly what they're on the Hill doing every day, which is we want to participate. The system is broken. We need to reform the system. So, again, that's that message isn't getting out either. But that is exactly what's going on. I'm a firsthand witness to that. So I think that's where the common ground is. We got to find a way to fix the system.
And because who the system's failing, it's causing strife and struggle for landlords, but it's failing those tenants. Mm-hmm. For every instance that you're talking about, there's a tenant involved in that where they are housing insecure. The landlord it could be the most productive relationship between the tenant and landlord, and it's going to be it's a total imbalance for the tenant because they feel bad because the landlord is not going to get paid. They don't know whether or not they're going to get to stay there. It could be a great apartment, it could be a great landlord, a great situation for them, and they are utterly powerless inside of that broken system.
And before we end this, and I don't want to keep dominating the conversation, I will say this is not I'm not saying anything about Hawes. This was a discussion about the state and the national level. I don't have any.
That's right.
This is not about our own housing authority. Want to make that clear.
And it's okay if it is. Because again, one of the things that can stand up and say is like, you all shouldn't be doing this because we can show that our housing authority does do a good job. Or this is what we need to be looking for. If you're going to do this, let's put it on a clock. And let's say, let's figure out solutions around it to get to the better place. And again, these are going to be some of the conversations we're going to have to swing around. John, I don't know if you know this. I used to be a developer. I used to, so
I remember that.
I understand these arguments. I totally understand it. I just know to Paula's point, at the end of the day, the folks who are worse off even than the landlords, the mom and pop landlords. Here in New Orleans, we are standing up a program. We are raising money to give money to the mom and pop landlords to help them fix up their properties because no one else will lend to them. And we are saying that because this is the gap in the system. This is a huge gap in the system to help those small mom and pop landlords. And at the same time, we're telling them, you can't discriminate against Section 8 because we're going to give you money. We're going to also give you some debt. You need to be managing this. And we are working to make sure that the housing authority treats these landlords correctly, gets them set up correctly, and that the tenants are treated correctly. So there's a way of recognizing that it is a balancing act.
Yeah.
And that we're certainly not anti-landlord. And that's not a message that we would propose to, but we have to recognize that there's a lot of anti-people messaging out there. And it's not a binary choice. These are your customers.
Right.
These are your customers. You can't be anti-tenant as a landlord unless you're just crazy and evil. And it's because you're like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna be against the people who gonna pay me. How does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add to that because, you know, we are witnessing that in our community. And the landlords, in order to try to fix this, they are targeting the tenants and doing all kinds of trickery to get them moved. You know, if they don't fix up their units, Section 8 is not going to approve them. So they have to leave. And so that's what they're doing. They're not fixing their heating. They're letting their water get cut off. They're doing all kinds of things to get rid of Section 8 people. It's so unfair to them. It's not their fault.
And so everybody's got to work together. The landlords and the tenants have to work together. And that's, again, also a distinction in this process is that and COVID, to Marla's point, is a really good example of this, right? With all the eviction moratoriums out there, and you all did a good job of getting your money out in Winston-Salem. But there were other parts of the country that did not do a really good job of getting, sorry, go ahead, Derwin, say it again.
I said, thanks, Marla.
Yeah. But there were other communities that did terrible jobs of getting their money out while the eviction moratoriums were in effect. And a lot of landlords, instead of working with their tenants to get the money out, started battering against the eviction moratorium. And the problem wasn't per se the eviction moratorium, it was the fact that the billions of dollars in cash that were being made available that could make these landlords whole weren't being distributed. And so those in those areas where you had landlords who did not do that, they said, we're going to sue the federal government. We're going to sue to end the eviction moratorium, when what they should have been doing was working with their tenants to get the money moving. Their money was there at state and local levels sitting in bank accounts to pay them. And so again, that's the other thing that we have to be getting folks to be thinking about, is that you're a property owner, you have rights, you also have responsibilities, but you are closer to the tenants than you are to the public officials who would pit landlord versus tenant. That is a symbiotic relationship. It's not parasitic, it should be symbiotic. You're in it together and you should be working together.
Yeah, and Janika, one of the interesting things that happened during COVID, I was still at the apartment association at the time. One of the things that was really interesting to me is that what was revealed was that through I was hearing a lot of one-by-one experiences from, you know, across different types of landlords, across different types of properties, and with different types of residents. And what's true before COVID and during COVID and after COVID is that these are they're not all the same, right? Not all residents are the same, not all landlords are the same. But what you saw was, in general, the same percentage of people who were paying their rent on time. It kind of stayed consistent throughout COVID. And, you know, you had people that were working together. You had the same, I will say, the same probably percentage of landlords who were able to work with their residents. And when there was the hiccup because even the best run systems like we had here, it took time to get that money, to get the systems in place, to get the money distributed. And so there were these hiccups, and you had the same percentage of folks who were able to kind of work it out and keep people in place and work through the system over time. And so it just really reinforced that, you know, we talk about the landlords and we talk about the residents, and within those communities, there's this wide variety of how they, on the landlord side, the type of housing that they manage, how they manage it, you know, what their own processes are, you know, what their own policies are, how they, you know, how they handle each various situation. And the same thing with residents. You know, there is this, you know, so we have to be really careful about it, you know, talking about the landlords or the residents, because there is no one prototypical from either side of the aisle in either community.
Exactly. That's the piece that unfortunately, Section 8 tenants in particular don't get that. And yeah, and it is really easy to blame the landlords. That's why we want to keep focusing on the systemic problems, the systemic gaps, the biases, the blind spots. And COVID showed that. I mean, we talk about this all the time nationally. The fact that landlords were one of the only businesses, one of the required businesses that did not get dedicated funding in the initial stimulus, that landlords were excluded from getting any income relief, and that unless you were a landlord of a certain size, a property manager of a certain size who had staff, you couldn't even participate in the PPP program.
Yeah.
Right, because you were just using it to make payroll. So if you own a duplex that helps pay your bills in your house as a retiree, and that the tenants lost their jobs and they couldn't, you know, all they had was the stimulus checks and they couldn't pay you, you were now also at risk of being housing insecure and losing your housing because this income source was now being deprived. There was nothing for them out there until the rental assistance, which dribbled out. And that the problem is the blindness around housing, that the fact that it's not seen as something that's necessary, even though we were saying to everyone, you needed to shelter at home.
And I see Paul's message, and Paul, I blame Derwin for bringing this up.
Oh, yep. So we are offering to Paul, Ryan, and Joe. Alex and I are going to try to do it. We can do a briefing with you all next week, if y'all are game for that, so you can add.
I was going to ask if there's some remediation available with that, because I'd like to hear the data piece myself, but I just need to go in order to get dressed and get to my church in time. So thanks.
This was an important conversation because we do need to model what's going to be happening over the next, so you got to get ready for it. Y'all got to be prepared for it. But yes, we do want to make sure that you get the information. So Joe, Paul, and Ryan, Marla will email with us on an email, and we'll find some time to meet with you all next week.
Very good. Thank you, guys.
And I'm good for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, and
I'm good.
I'm not
Ryan,
for the duration.
So Ryan, you're going to stay for a while. Okay. Okay, you're good. So then it's Paul and Joe then. Okay. All right, Alex, without further ado.
I'm going to travel with my phone, but I'll be on listening.
All right, Paula, thank you.
All right, folks. So Marla shared with you some of our preliminary analysis that we had done. And again, this is, I'll kind of go over what the preliminary analysis is versus kind of what you can expect to be coming up over the course of this presentation. So just a reminder of what we went over at our last meeting with kind of the data analysis components that we're going to go through. We are going to have a demand model that is kind of a comprehensive look at the need to build and preserve housing over the next 10 years. And that is going to go, it's going to be broken down by income level, housing typology, bedrooms, like sizes, lots of different detailed pieces that you guys will need in order to get to that actionable strategy we were talking about. It'll also look at, kind of need for growth. A lot of these models sometimes just say, well, you need to build X number of units. And what we found is like, well, that's important to accommodate growth, of course. There's also a lot of ways in which the existing housing is sort of mispriced, right? Like it doesn't necessarily meet the needs that we see in the community, because you might say, well, we have enough units theoretically for folks at 50 to 80% AMI, but actually what's happened is we haven't been building enough units. And so all of our like 120% and up AMI folks are like renting down, right, into those units. And so there's actually not enough for those folks. And so those are the kinds of issues and, sort of ideas that the demand model is going to uncover for us. We also are going to be looking at cost burden, energy burden. So are we seeing folks who are burdened by energy prices and costs, and then racial equity. And so what we've done here is taking kind of an initial look at, some, like over, very high level look at like some racial equity pieces, but we're going to be evaluating all of our recommendations on a racial equity basis as well. So kind of looking at where we are at baseline and then saying, how do these solutions help us address that? And that will be the case kind of across the board for all the solutions that we propose. During our last meeting, we also discussed ensuring there's a geographic component to our analysis, which was in the plan, but being sort of explicit that we want to look at where to apply different solutions, where in Winston-Salem are different things needed, and what places are sort of amenable to different types of solutions like preservation, new development, like, kind of different types of needs for different bedroom sizes or different, kind of populations of folks. So we'll be looking at that as well. So this preliminary data analysis is really just a high-level initial analysis to start us setting the groundwork and thinking about what some of the major issues and questions we can expect to see throughout the course of this analysis are going to be. This is based on 5-year American Community Survey data, so the most recent 2017 to 2021 data, as well as the U.S. Department of Energy's LEAD tool, which enables us to do energy burden analysis. And we're going to discuss at the end of this some local data and just like questions for you guys that are going to help us refine and update this work. So buildings and structures, some of this stuff is going to be old hat to those of you who have seen some of these previous analyses, but it's stuff we need to kind of look at to begin with. So what we know is, Winston-Salem is, dominated by single unit detached, single family homes, although there are, a number of sort of mid-size, especially rental properties as well. We have a wide variety of ages of residential structures. And so, I think just as we think about ages of structures, I like to think about these almost as kind of like household demographics as well, where that different ages of structures start to need different things, right? So like things that have been built since 2010 are kind of, ready to go for the most part. You might start to think about a new roof. These guys are like in like fully, we need new roofs. We need to start replacing, sort of major systems. These sort of mid-level properties, these mid-age properties are ones where we can really see them go a variety of directions, right? So if they've been well maintained over time and are in areas that are highly valued that can receive financing, they may be like, in great shape and highly valued. And then in other areas, they may be, more, they may not have been maintained as well, right? For various reasons. And so those are places where we have opportunities to kind of think about tipping neighborhoods and kind of like working to make sure that neighborhoods that have this age of housing and were built at these times can have the resources that they need to make sure they are moving along the right path and that folks can maintain their homes. And then we have our kind of historic properties and very similar to the others, right? You may have very highly valued historic districts in combination with places where folks do not have the resources necessary to maintain their properties. And so those are the kinds of things we'll be starting to divide out over the course of this analysis as we look at places that have sort of differently aged structures and were built at different times. Households and cost burden, just straight up, again, housing tenure, we are a little bit more than half owner occupied. And you guys are basically just under the national average for urban areas in terms of owner occupation. So rural areas tend to have much higher rates of home ownership, but urban areas tend to be about 59% owner occupied on average nationwide. Winston-Salem's about 54% owner occupied, so not too far off the national average. In terms of who is experiencing cost burden the most, we see that renters, and again, this is not unusual at all for most cities, but renters are experiencing the highest rates of cost burden, about 21,000 cost burden renter households, about 8,000 homeowners with a mortgage are cost burdened, and then just a few, sort of like 2,000 homeowners without a mortgage are cost burdened. And these are folks who obviously we tend to see maybe in some of those homes, like if you don't have a mortgage and you remain cost burdened, you tend to see folks lower incomes, fixed incomes, potentially don't have the resources to maintain their properties. So these things will all relate to what some of those solutions for these folks may be. And we can see if these issues are concentrated in any particular areas. In terms of energy burden, Winston-Salem is actually doing pretty well on energy cost compared to North Carolina as a whole. So your energy costs across the board for folks are lower than what folks in North Carolina overall are paying. And so that's good news. And so what that translates to is actually in a set of energy burdens that are less extensive than what I have seen in a lot of other places where I've done this analysis. So we do see that this line at 6% is kind of the national threshold. So it's about, a fifth of what you want to be paying on your housing costs. That's 6% of your income. And so that's about how much like people put the threshold of, you know, if you're paying more than 6% in energy costs compared to, you know, of your household income per year, then you are probably energy burdened because you're just paying more than you can afford on energy. And what we see is this is largely, so our 0 to 30% AMI folks are the ones who experience that across the board. And particularly if they are in older homes, if they are in homes that were built before 1960, then they are seeing the highest levels of energy burden. So about 15% of their incomes is going on energy cost versus say somebody who is in a new home, you know, a newer home built since 2010 and earning, you know, sort of that earning 0 to 30%, they're more at 10% energy burden, right? So we do see that age of home is somewhat predictive of energy burden for folks at lower income levels. And that we also see that those older homes built before 1959, folks who are at 30 to 60% AMI are also on average energy burdened in those homes. So focusing some of our efforts and thinking about weatherization, say, of older homes in Winston-Salem, and especially in areas where we know that folks tend to have lower incomes, also thinking about, you know, say multifamily properties and, you know, sort of older multifamily properties, maybe ideas that we can come up with out of some of this analysis. On the racial equity side, you know, we just took a quick look at like, you know, again, this is a broad analysis. We'll be getting more specific, but at tenure by race and ethnicity. And what we can see is that we have a really big home ownership gap by race and ethnicity in Winston-Salem. And so, you know, you can see we have about 67% of households who with the householder identifying as white alone. So about 2/3 of those folks own their home versus just 38% of houses that are headed by Black or African-American folks, and then 45% of Hispanic or Latino householders. And so definitely a big gap there. I mean, you can also see this one is more of the graph is actually more on absolute numbers. And so what you can see is we also just have more white alone households in general than any of the other demographics, because that's, you know, Winston-Salem's population demographics. And so, you know, it's more of a, it's just a question of like, you know, when you look at the overall statistics and don't break them down, we may see higher home ownership levels, but a lot of that is driven by the pretty high home ownership levels among white households specifically. And Ryan, I see your chat about having incentives to assist with weatherization. That is absolutely true. There's a lot of incentives out there right now related to addressing energy burden, weatherization, solar, like all these sort of green features that can help you, you know, work with folks on the weatherization and energy efficiency piece. So this is a really great time to be looking at that issue for sure.
And one of the things that we also want to make sure that we're doing inside of this is costing these out to know. Often what you see sometimes is folks will go out and get those kinds of federal dollars, and there's not a real connection to what it will take in particularly in an individual community like Winston-Salem to actually affect these repairs to get to an acceptable level based on what's going on in your market, based on what's going on in your existing housing stock.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So that's one of the reasons why this kind of data analysis is critical. And it also needs to be tempered. This is why we want to have a conversation with community about it too, right? Because that's another good way to find out. And John, your folks, we want to make sure that landlords are having these conversations as well. What is it going to take to get your properties to these new standards? Because we need to get to these new standards. And so what additional investment opportunities do landlords and homeowners need to get to this? Because that's what the people need. The people need homes that are energy efficient, and one, to save the planet, and two, just so they can pay their light bills.
So the next steps, you know, that's again sort of a brief overview of where we're at today, but the next steps are we're going to really start diving into this data analysis work. And particularly one of our first steps that we're proposing is to develop the demand model, because that's really going to inform a lot of the other solutions, right? And so we'll be working on that in the month of May. And then one of the things that I do want to do and wanted to kind of bring up to this group though, is to update some of this analysis. We're going to go a little deeper on some of these ACS pieces. And I'd like to be also updating some of these though with local data because it's more recent, right? So we can really get a sense of, you know, the ACS data now is starting to kind of get into, you know, we have the 20 and 2021 pandemic years in there. So we're not like, you know, a couple of years ago, we were just like missing the COVID period out of a lot of our public data, and it really was not that helpful. Now we can start to look at that period, but local data, say on like sales prices, permitting, you know, things like that, just like getting a sense of what's going on in the market for real, is very helpful to make sure that we can give you the most accurate current assessment of the sort of opportunities and the solutions that may be applicable. So I'm curious if folks here can, you know, we can talk to Marla about this too, but I'm curious if like this group, you know, are these things we think we can get access to? Do we have kind of good realtor relationships that can let us get some of that more recent sales price data, things like that?
Yeah, Alex, I work with a guy named Tony Jarrett at Allen Tate. He's their VP for basically a whole lot of North Carolina, and he's given me a lot of MLS data over the last year and a half.
Okay.
For some presentations I've done. So I can reach out to him, or I can connect you two so that he can. He's probably the best person I know to get that kind of data in a way that you might want to use it.
Yep. That's great. And then, yeah, Paul, I see your question. Will the local data in this slide be available by the kickoff meeting? We will definitely, I'll make sure, John, if you can make that connection, we'll try to move quickly and make sure that we can do those updates before the kickoff meeting. And the demand model, I think we're hoping to have some preliminary results before then to share as well.
Okay. Oh, Alex, I see in your next bullet there, geographic analysis, our census tracts, right geographies to use. I've never been a real fan of the configuration of the census tracts in Winston-Salem.
Okay.
But the Planning and Development Services Department has done a lot of neighborhood level planning. And I see that Kirk Erickson, the Assistant Planning Director, is on the call. I don't know if he might be able to get you plugged into the kind of geographies we use for area planning and things like that, but there might be some data available on that basis.
Yeah, Paul, I'd be glad to have any conversations, Alex, certainly that you wanted to have on that, and or get you tied in with our GIS and mapping folks. That might be the better option, but if you want to just circle back offline, we can take care of that.
Sure thing. And just a quick question back to you, Paul. When you say you're not a fan of how the census tracts are configured, you know, we can sometimes go down to the block group level. It just, especially if we're doing 5-year data, it's just depending on sort of the level of accuracy we're seeing there. Like sometimes you get really big margins of error that are hard to like report on with success. And so one of the things that, you know, when it comes to, you know, I think Kirk, you know this too, but like when it comes to trying to approximate those neighborhoods or work with neighborhoods, like I really like working with neighborhood level data because it's just more comprehensible to folks too, right? Like if you're like, oh, this is the case in census tract 16.71, everyone's like, I don't know what you mean, right? Whereas if you're like, well, this is what's happening in downtown, right? People know what that means. And it's much easier to communicate that way. But we'll just need to make sure that the data is still going to come from a census level, and then it's going to get sort of fed into those neighborhood boundaries. So if there are some census tracts that are just like weird and like represent like a wide variety of people, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. Is that one of the issues that you found with the census tracts? Is that they're just like, you get like ones that like widely vary in terms of income level and like composition?
Yeah, and just kind of the geographic nature of them kind of go in some weird places and all that. In planning, we worked with block data a lot in kind of reconfiguring data on the neighborhood level. So I don't know whether the 2020 data, I've been retired for a few years, so I don't know how well the 2020 data is on the block level, but that might be something to look at. But
and just to chime in briefly on this, because this is probably down in the weeds for this group, but that's exactly right. We've basically taken the block level or the tract level data, depending on the analysis, and constituted it around more recognizable neighborhood boundaries. And for some of those larger tracts where you generally go further out in the community and you're trying to reach the same population thresholds on the tract level that the census does, our staff has kind of figured out ways to extrapolate where those various populations are within the tract, at least with kind of to pass a straight face test. So again, we can circle back on that and
Okay,
make it so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to
that would be
speak.
great. Yeah, I would like to be consistent and I would like to not reinvent the wheel. So that's perfect. Kirk, we'll set something up. That'll be really good.
Great.
And then finally, I know folks are like anxious to get to some of the cost estimate pieces, and just noting that, you know, the cost estimates, we are absolutely going to provide those. A lot of that is going to happen as we're developing, you know, sort of ideas about recommendations and programs, right? So those are a little bit further out in time just because we need to get to the point where we have sort of a list of ideas that we're evaluating, and kind of saying, are these the right ones? And as we do that, we will be looking at the costs of all of those as well. There may be, if there's some things we're curious about the cost of sort of more upfront, right? Then we may be able to kind of advance that more quickly for some programs than others. Say if we felt like, you know, now is the moment for weatherization, right? And there's like money coming through and we should be moving forward quickly on that. We might be able to kind of move more quickly on some of those pieces. So that's another thing I think we'll just want to keep touching base on as we move forward, is where there are, you know, immediate opportunities, say for public funding, and we need a little bit more data on that front. Would love to kind of know from this group where that may be the case so we can make sure we're not missing out. All right, let's see, I see another chat. All right. Okay. So anything else from this group on data questions about next steps, or data you'd like to see? You know, any data related questions at this point? Good. All right. Well, in that event, I will hand it back over to Andronika. And Andronika.
I do have a question.
Oh, Paula, yes.
You mentioned data on a neighborhood level. Is that like data block to block? That block to block data?
So when you say block to block, you mean like sort of physical blocks?
Physical blocks, yes.
So probably not at the physical block level, although if there were things like, you know, vacancy, you know, I think one other thing we actually want to see if we can get, and maybe Kirk, I can talk to you about this as well, is probably some parcel level data if we can. So Kirk and you know, Marla, we can talk about that as well, is sort of what's available on that front. And so if we do have parcel data, we may be able to do some more like granular analysis on like vacancy and housing conditions, like very locally. But it sort of depends on what's available from like the assessor in the area.
And Paula, I'll just add to that. We definitely do have a lot of data from the county tax assessor's office related to the physical structures and things of that nature. Obviously, if we're looking at the demographics or that type of data, we're not going to be able to break it down by smaller groups than the census blocks, or and again, that's basically something that we can kind of package into the neighborhoods, but certainly not the blocks in the sense of from street to street.
That's right. Thanks, Kirk. So Paula, does that answer your question? I think we can get on like the structure level. We can be like, this house is vacant, right? But for demographics and things like that, we can only sort of get as small as the census allows us to, which is probably groups of blocks together. It's not going to be single physical blocks.
Yeah, that's great. And Mark, this is a question for Marla. We did some work, you know, and it was house by house. And I forgot what that was called. But are we looking at doing any more of that in terms of assessing conditions of housing in a particular neighborhood?
So you're talking about the land grid process, which is now called, the company's called ReGrid. And we actually have a contract with a group who is going throughout the entire city doing that assessment now, that house by house assessment. And so just so you all know, we contracted with a group called State Code Enforcement. And so they started in the Northeast Ward and went east. So Northeast and East. So they're trying to hit all of the wards, and they have a list of different exterior conditions that they're checking for, roofs, gutters, doors, windows, siding, porches, and things of that nature. And they're rating those things from poor to fair to good, things like that. And they're also taking a photo of each house and attaching it to the rating of the conditions. And the idea was for us to get a better sense rather of the extent of need for rehab, certainly on the exterior. While the city's existing programs, rehab programs, have largely focused on the interior and major systems like electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roofing, and the floor structure. And then we always have to address minimum housing code issues. There's not been a lot of times as much attention to the envelope of the house and those kinds of things where we might have put in $65,000 inside the house, but you couldn't tell because the outside needed help, but 65 was the max of what we could provide. So in this instance, now we understand what's happening on the outside and what kinds of programs can be created that can ultimately give not only the house, but the neighborhood a facelift. I've been one of those who believes that although we need to produce more housing and we need to preserve housing, we also need to, as part of that preservation, look at how we help neighborhoods in general. And so more of that comprehensive community approach, right? And so to the extent the city council will be considering a bond initiative in a few years, this can help provide some of the information they need to maybe talk to the citizens about, a certain level of a bond package, right? Based on what we have observed through this housing conditions assessment. So that is currently underway. We started the process, I want to say, in the fall, actually, last fall. So I think we're now we may be in the Southeast Ward now, starting in the Northeast, East. I think we're in Southeast at this point. Yeah, I think it's Southeast or East. I can't remember. I'm not East, Southeast or South. But we're making our way around the city by ward to catalog all this information. And like I said, we're using a company called Regrid, where the data is stored in the cloud. And we can do mapping and other stuff with it, like heat spots and things of that nature, based on the conditions. So that'll be another piece of useful information when we're done.
When do you think the timeline is to finish that up, Marla?
My hope is before the end of the calendar year. Mm-hmm.
So I have one quick question on the cost side. How are we going to, I can tell you from the development sector, and the building sector, one of the number one complaints I get, or one of the, issues that we're dealing with are just the unpredictability of cost for any particular material. So how are we going to index for that?
Yeah, it is a really good question, because right now is a very hard time to do cost estimation, right? So I won't deny that the cost estimates are going to be sort of approximations no matter what we do, right? What I think we can do is sort of do our best to reflect the ways, what we know is the costs have climbed, right? So like over the pandemic years. And what needs to happen is we need to reflect at least the fact that there is a higher cost associated with doing these projects now than there used to be. And that is, I think, one of the things that has been some of the biggest changes, right? Over the last, 3 to 5 years, that has, especially 3 years, that has driven the inflation we're seeing on the rents and other sides as well, right? And so being clear that we have to do something, that we have to have solutions that where we can try to meet the actual costs of building, meet the actual cost of rehab, the actual cost of management is going to be important. So I agree it's going to end up being approximate. These are also going to end up being very large numbers, I will say, right? And so, because that's just the case. And so I don't, I think we'll just have to do our best. I do think one thing that we have done and that we will do on this front as well is make sure we're interviewing local builders and developers to make sure we're getting at least the most recent numbers we possibly can.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, it's not just cost too, it's availability. I mean, there are lead times now on things like windows that are
Garage doors.
if you told me a year, 2 or 3 years ago that we were going to wait 8 months to get windows,
Yeah,
I'd have said that's crazy.
100%.
Right now, Duke Energy can't provide transformers in a timely fashion. They can't provide temporary power on construction projects right now. I mean, they can, but it's sketchy. They have their own supply chain issues. So that's going to be a hard part of the equation for the near future, I think.
Bye, Paula. Thank you.
All right, well, it sounds this is a good conversation. So thank you all for offering all of those inputs. I will be in touch with folks who have offered to provide various assistance in meetings and things. Yeah, looking forward to continuing to kind of develop out this methodology with all of you. I think if we can keep having these conversations, we'll get to a place that's really, really great in terms of, and there's so much, already I can see there's a lot more kind of types of data that are going to be available than we are able to access in some communities. So that's really a testament to the work that y'all have been doing.
All right. So I think that's it for us. That's what we have on deck for the schedule for the presentation today. We're moving. I just sent everything off to the designer. So and hopefully she's going to be able to get something. We asked for her to get it back to us today so we can get it back to you all over the weekend or Monday at the earliest. We'll keep it moving. As noted, we will be doing a version of the data. A lot of the data that we saw today is going to be included in the data walk, including some of the data, but also some of the data that Alex hasn't done yet. We are hoping to get as much of the demand model as possible done in time for the May 23rd event. So that's the plan. That's what we're going to be doing. And we're excited to be working with you all and supporting y'all through this process. And I'm turning back over to your chair, Derwin, who owes me a Coca-Cola, but didn't acknowledge it, but that's okay.
Send me your address. I'll send you a case.
I will be there on the 23rd. So
all right. I'll go pick some up. But
I think by North Carolina law, you're required to buy her like a cheer wine or sun drop while she's here.
Yeah, cheer wine.
Yeah. Actually, a question before we wrap up here. And this Marla, it may be a question for you to jump in on. I met with the mayor a couple weeks ago, and in that conversation, there was again, I think we talked about different reports and updates to the council about things. And that was something that came up in that conversation with him about some updates, and in particular, in reference to Andronika actually being a part of that not just something that comes from the coalition, but also for her participating in some form in the updates. Because I mentioned in some of the things I guess he's working on, and from a council perspective about the housing things and funding and that kind of stuff. He again acknowledged some not necessarily knowing all that's happening that's going on there. And so just wanted to note that and just figure out a cadence that we may be able to look at as we are kicking off. What kind of cadence do we want to then now have as a report back to council on what we're doing and how we're moving? That's not just the annual piece.
Sure. And it might be good to provide an update in June. Because then we will have had the kickoff and so forth. Some of the data we've gotten in a better place and so forth, and we can provide a written update, and then if need be, a presentation to council at their June meeting might be a good strategy to look at.
Okay.
And yeah, we can continue to work on that. And we've been making the calls about our location for the kickoff. the library is not available. And we haven't reached the Millennium Center. I've got my team member working on it as we've been in the meeting. And so she's now reaching out to Goodwill. But at least right now, unfortunately, the library is not available, excuse me, that evening. So hopefully either Goodwill will give us a thumbs up or we'll hear back from the Millennium Center. But hopefully I'll have that information out to you all this afternoon.
Cool. All right.
Oh, one other update I should make is that a couple of weeks ago, the city did a departmental reorganization. And so we no longer have the community development department. We now have a neighborhood services department, which is really the replacement for community development. And then a new department was created called housing development. And I have been assigned to housing development. And so we're a small department. We don't have all of our staff and infrastructure in place, but our mission is to just focus on the development of housing to try to advance some of the needs that we have here. So there'll be more information as time goes by. Like I said, this just happened effective April 17th. And so a lot of the mechanics are still being worked out, but just wanted to let you all know that there has been a reorganization and I'm in a different role now.
Marla, who's in charge of the neighborhood services piece?
Chantel McClam.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Well, this was a good meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andronika and Alex. Oh, Andronika, we didn't meet your other team member that you referenced earlier.
Oh, yeah, so Trent, let's see how we can, yeah, he can come over here. Y'all saw a picture of it.
Hi, Trent.
Hey, nice to meet y'all. I've been watching y'all through the whole thing, but I was kind of behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Well, good to meet you. Looking forward.
We got a team.
Will Trent join you and Alex at the kickoff?
We're not sure if Alice is coming for the kickoff. We were trying to figure out, because we want Alice to come to, we want to have a big data presentation and we wanted to be there for that. Sure. But either Trent or another team member will be joining me for the kickoff. Yes.
Very good.
Yeah, we gotta roll deep. We gotta start rolling deep. And,
Yeah, okay.
and also adding that Winston-Salemite to our team as well. So
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Very good. Very good. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, appreciate
Real one,
everybody. Yeah.
Before we go, real quickly, there are a bunch of bills in North Carolina in the legislature right now that are related to housing.
Mhm.
Some of them affect more of the planning side, like I'm sure Kirk's aware of some that are floating around out there. I am not going to sit here and take a position on any of them, and I'm not going to ask the Housing Coalition to take a position on them. But Andronika, you had mentioned before that this is a boring subject and people don't really get engaged. There is a ton of attention being paid to housing right now in the state. A lot of it's related to we have a Republican legislature that has spent a lot of time really focusing on economic development. And for whatever reason, we've had a ton of economic development projects come in, and a lot of the companies that are coming in are worried about housing and worried about housing availability and workforce housing and all that. So all I'm going to say is I agree with you. It's hard to get the average person out to talk about housing, but from the municipal and state leadership position, it's kind of topic number one everywhere I go. So we'll probably get more attention from some folks than you might be surprised at how much attention we get, because this is kind of the
That's good.
cause celeb right now.
That's good. That's good. I think even with it being the cause celeb is still limited, but I think again, people having an outlet And that's got to also be part of this. Obviously, we want to rely on the Affordable Housing Coalition when it comes to how Winston-Salem wants to respond to some of these policy pieces, but we've got to also make the space to have the conversation. So I think doing a debrief in June with community about what happened in the legislature is going to be critical. It's also a part of, because we want to incorporate what's already happened in North Carolina and in Winston-Salem. We're trying to build on that to create a new system. There is no way to go in wholesale and drop on you all. The blueprint doesn't allow, it's not such that it will just drop onto the community and it'll fix everything. It should be assessing what's the existing systems, talking about the gaps, proposing solutions to close those gaps, identifying who's going to close those gaps, and also being clear about the things that are already moving, so that they can be integrated into the overall blueprint. Not this standalone weird thing that's out there, that's not connected to ongoing initiatives.
I agree. Yeah, there's nothing specific I wanted to bring up other than just to say that we're getting a lot of attention on housing right now. And so I think it's both an opportunity and also can be a challenge, because everybody has their own ideas about how to address housing. And we just have to be aware of it.
Yep.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, definitely appreciate everybody, and great dialogue, great conversation. And we'll get invites for the change on the meetings, the schedule for that.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, great.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Have a good
Take care.
weekend.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.